Alright guys, I just wanted to add this clip in at the beginning of the video. This is just for a basic setup, like for newbies. I'm assuming if you're watching this video then you know nothing about it. If you already know how to build one, then you probably don't need to watch this, because it's just very basic and very simple to give somebody the building blocks to expand later on. This is just the first part in the series. This is the hardware side. So after this we'll be moving on to the software and then expanding on it later. So alright, well, let's roll the footage. Alright, what is up guys? This is Brandon, back with Brandon Coin, and I'm tuning in upstairs in the mining cave, and I just wanted to go through and show y'all a quick how-to of actually like start to finish, no stupid questions, like everything that I do to get a basic mining rig assembled and together. And then after this, following this video, probably the next day or two, will be the actual software side. But today is just the hardware side, and here I'll go through what you actually need here in a second. Okay, the first thing, and probably one of the most important things that you're going to need, is a motherboard. And when you're picking out your motherboard, just be mindful of what CPU socket it is, and then you'll need the corresponding a CPU that fits in that socket. This motherboard will be linked down in the description. It is a H110 D3A gigabyte, and this motherboard has one full-size PCI Express slot and then 5 mini slots. So this motherboard will support 6 graphics cards right out of the box, and it also has an M.2 slot, so you can add another one later. With the BIOS update, this motherboard will hold 7 graphics cards, but we're not that far yet. So you'll need a motherboard, then you'll need a processor. The processor I'm running is a Pentium G4400. This is a LGA 1511 or 1151. I cannot even remember. Anyway, the link for that will be down in the description also, but you just have to make sure your processor matches the socket for your motherboard. Then also you need to get RAM. I get minimum 4 gigabytes of RAM, and your motherboard will designate whether it takes DDR3, DDR4. If you have a super old system, you can even get mine on some DDR2. I had a system downstairs that I mined on. It was a DDR2 system. It did okay, but going with new parts is probably takes a lot of the headache out of it, because if you buy a bunch of older stuff and you don't know what exactly works, you don't know if you're going to be diagnosing hardware problems or software problems. So going with a new fresh stick of 4 gigabyte. This is DDR4 because this motherboard supports only DDR4. And then your processor, 9 times out of 10, if you buy your processor brand new, it comes with a stock box cooler. That's what that'll look like. That's your Intel box cooler. Then you need a power supply. Depending on the graphics cards you're going to run, you want to look up their total wattage, or TDP. I think that's total power draw, or TPD. This rig is all GTX 1050s. These are low power draw cards, and I even turned the power down on them a little bit, so I can actually get away with a 500 watt power supply to drive 6 of these GTX 1050s. But this is all you need just to get started. You can start with 1 graphics card, absolutely. Oh, and then over here, this is semi-optional. These are power button. Well, it's a power button right here. It's got some little light power lights. I'm not even gonna hook those up. But this power button, I'll show you where that goes on this motherboard. It's got a header panel up here with some pins. Every motherboard's a little bit different, but if you look in the manual that comes with it, it'll tell you where the power pin buttons are, and then all you literally do is just take the one that says for the power button, and it's got 2 openings on it. If the camera will focus right there, it's got 2 openings, and you slide it over those 2 pins, so that way when you hit the button, your system will come on. The ghetto, or cheap way, is to stick a little knife or a screwdriver down in there to short those pins out to start the system up. I don't like doing that. I mean, the power buttons are like a couple dollars. Link for those will also be down in the description. And as for the GPU that I'm using, these are the Gigabyte dual fan GTX 1050s, and these are 2 gigabyte cards. there's the part number right there. Yeah, so link for those will be down in the description also. These cards have settled down. They were making a lot more, you know, a month ago, but it looks like they're roughly around 90 cents to $1 a day. And you can find them on sale every now and then for about $129 to $139. So not a bad card to start off with and then fill out with other cards later. So let's get started, and the first thing you would want to do is go ahead and put your CPU in. Mine still has thermal paste on it from when I disassembled everything and took this rig apart, but normally your box cooler will have pre-applied thermal paste on the bottom of it. If it's brand new out of the box, you can take a look at the bottom. It's got it, so you don't need to add any more. Mine's still got it on the CPU, so I'm not going to worry about it. But you're going to want to grab your processor and then look and find the arrow. See the arrow right there? Right there on that corner? See how the other corners don't have that? They got a dot and a dot. And then go to your motherboard. You see the arrow on the motherboard right there? That's how you drop it in. So arrow to arrow, and if you notice, it'll fit right in. It's got some slots, and it only goes in one way. Then after you have it in there, you're just gonna flop this little tray down, flop that down, make sure it lips up underneath that screw, and then you can lock it down. After it's locked down, then you can take your CPU cooler, drop that bad boy on there. It fits into these little slots. Once you get it into the actual slots, it'll kind of fit in there, and then you can push these pins down. Well, I'm gonna have to turn them. Then you can, yeah, you can push it down. So normally they're in the correct orientation already. Where I took it apart, these were in the wrong orientation, so I gotta turn them. Alright. Now on your cooler, it's gonna have this little fan. You gotta look for where it says CPU fan. Do you see that? Right there. Boom. It will only go on one way. You'll see it's got the little ridges. So you go ahead, plug that bad boy in. She's on. Make sure your wires aren't gonna get tangled up in the fan and nothing crazy like that. Then you take your RAM. If you notice the notch in the middle is not perfectly in the middle, you have to look and see in your RAM slots where it's offset to. I always install the RAM on the closest to the motherboard side if you're doing a single 1 gig stick. So it just fits down into there. Well, slides straight down. And you push it and it locks in. After you get that clicked and locked in, you're basically assembled on your motherboard side, and then you can pick your frame out. The reason why I disassembled this one, because I had it in this wooden frame, but I'm going to move it all over to this shoe rack frame, and it's going to look something like this when we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and get my motherboard and set it down on the bottom. Whatever you're setting your motherboard on, you do not want to have it set on bare metal, because it will short out. There's circuits and stuff on the bottom. That's a bad idea. So if it's plastic or wood, anything that's not conductive, that's really what you want to go for. So I'm going to set it on there, and then we'll go on and show you the next portion of what needs to be done. Alright, so how I secure my motherboard to the these shoe racks is I just took a zip tie and put it through the actual hole where the screw goes. Zip tied that down, not too tight, just, you know, tight enough. Then I put another zip tie back here, and now this motherboard is actually like on there. Well, the power supply is not. I haven't mounted that yet, but yeah. So you don't have to get too crazy with mounting it, because ultimately, to me, it's all about getting these things airflow and getting them mining. They don't have to look beautiful and pretty. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some people's rigs look amazing, but for me, it's definitely a function over form. But the next thing you're going to do is grab your power supply, put it where you want it to be. And the first thing that I always plug in is the big 24-pin connector. If you'll notice, you got this This little one over on the side, you just got to make sure it's kind of positioned correctly. And there's always a clip on one side of the plug. Make sure the clip lines up with where the clip is on the actual plug on the motherboard. So mine's on the outside, so my clip will be on the outside. Let me see if I can do this one-handed. Here it is. Oh. There we go, one-handed. Okay, now the next thing you're going to look for is the external CPU power. There's usually another plug right there. Is that one. You can see it. It's 2 4-pins. Some older motherboards only use one single, but this is what the wire looks like off the motherboard or off the power supply. Just make sure it does say CPU on it and not PCI, because they are different plugs. See that? CPU. So I'm gonna run that up the back. If I can get it. Same thing with these, just make sure the clip's lined up with where the clip is on them. They only go in one way. And if you gotta force it, it's not right. So it should just slide in, click, then you're locked in, ready to go. And you're like, oh my god, what are all these extra wires? What's all this? Okay, we'll break it down. Let's see here. These right here, as it implies, these are PCIe. These are external power that go to a graphics card. For like this one example, has power going in the top. But a lot of these lower power cards don't. See? You notice it's missing? So on this system, this PCIe, I won't even need. So we'll just flop that one to the back. We'll worry about that one later. Now, oh, what are these plugs right here? These are what's called Sata power plugs. This is like the newer standard. It's been out for, I don't know, it's been out for years and years now, but this is kind of starting to take over from this style. And this is the 4-pin Molex cables. These have been out for like ever. I mean, the first couple computers I ever had, this is all they were running off of. There was no Sata power plugs. It was just Molex, and I believe there was another kind of plug too back in those. But this is what you're going to mostly see on most power supplies you buy nowadays. It's going to have Sata. It's going to have some Molex. It's got some more Sata right here. So the thing to get around that is if you actually need a Molex and you don't have one, they do make Sata to Molex adapters. And I actually got one right here. So it'll be a Sata on one end and then a Molex on the other. So just be careful with these. I've had a couple of them get hot on me and burn up, but other than that, you know, it's just, some people say don't use them. I mean, I have used them, and it seems like if they don't get hot and burn up right away, they're going to be fine. Because the only time I've actually seen one mess up on me is it messed up as soon as I pressed the power button. But I think the biggest issue people were talking about was the quality control where the pins go in on this side. And sometimes these pins are actually bent over, if you'll notice. And if they're touching each other, if that metal is touching each other, it will short out and it'll burn up something. So just be mindful of that. All these are separated nice and good. Haven't had any issues. So let's see here. What are we going on to next? Since this system, I'm not actually going to mount any graphics cards in the motherboard, because you absolutely can. Let's see. Let me take these out of here. I'll explain these in a second. Normally, you would just say, there's your PCI Express 16 slot, and you just drop the graphics card right there. Oh, hold on. Oh, my motherboard's just a little bit off. You would drop the graphics card in right there, and you'd be good to go. You could just go ahead and start mining off that, but you're like, well, what about these slots? Well, if you want it to actually be up and breathe more, there's these things called Pci Risers. You don't have to have these, but they make it awesome. This is the bottom piece, and the bottom piece actually fits right in here. If I can get it. There it goes. Okay. And for example, here's another one, and this is how it fits into the smaller ones. So you can just pop it right out. Oh, that's a tight fit. So that's a Pci Riser. That's a Pci Riser. Plug that one into there. We only need one for right now for the demonstration. And the other side of the riser, the actual riser, looks like this. Oh, you notice it's a 16 slot. But, you know, oh, it's only small down here, but it's big up here. It actually, for mining, all you need is that much of the actual data transfer port. You don't need a full express slot riser. On these risers, this one uses a 6-pin connector. I don't like these as much as I have some that take the Molex connector on the back. I prefer those, but I make sure all of them are at least version 006C or higher. Don't go older than this. People talk about having issues where they can't boot up and they won't hold enough power, or having a lot of instability issues. So out of all the version 006Cs that I've had one go bad out of, I think, like 14. So not a bad death ratio on those. But you notice you got a USB, and your USB literally just goes down and plugs straight into the motherboard, where you put in your little riser doohickey. So then this guy will go somewhere up here, and then we're going to mount our graphics card somewhere up here. And if you get the idea, you can multiply that across all of these. So then you can mount, you know, graphics card here, 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 and keep them spread out and actually keep them to where they can breathe. So I won't be able to hold the camera and do that myself, so I'm going to pause it and I'll cut right back to it after I get it together and explain what I did. Alright, so now I have the actual graphics card mounted into the riser. The plug is plugged into the Sata plug adapter, and the USB is plugged into the back of the riser, going down to the motherboard to the small little riser piece. On this motherboard, I forgot to mention, most of them aren't like this anymore, but it's got Molex power plugs that go directly into the motherboard. Most likely, if you don't get this exact motherboard, yours will not have that, because they've kind of gone away from that style. It still works though, don't get me wrong, and if you can find these motherboards for a good deal, they do work well. But that concludes the actual hardware portion of getting your basic miner set up. The next thing you'll need for the software portion is just a USB stick. Forgot to mention that in the beginning, but you will need the USB stick, and I will go into how to actually install and set up Simple Miner onto the USB stick, and your whole operating system will be on this, so you don't need a hard drive. You just need a LAN internet connection. And just so you know, I figured this out after the fact. You cannot run Simple Miner OS on Wi-Fi. It has to be on your Ethernet cord. So I did run me some Ethernet up here, and I'm wired. And yeah, so thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. If I missed anything, please comment down below. If I need to amend this video and take it down, I can. I think I pretty much covered the bases on all the basic stuff. This will actually be enough right here just to get you up and going. And rough math off the top of my head, this system, like what you see right here, is maybe, you know, 150, 200, 300. You know, this is maybe 350 bucks worth of hardware, and we can get up and going and expand it later. That's the big thing, is it has expandability. So that way you can end up turning it into something like this. So, you know, that's got one 1050 right there, a 1050 Ti, a 1080, and a 1080. And you can just kind of keep adding to it as you go. See, I got an empty slot there, I got an empty slot there. And you can even link multiple power supplies together. Won't be going over that in this video. This is just a beginner's how-to setup. But later on, if y'all want me to, I can do a more in-depth video that goes into actually getting more than one graphics card and more than one power supply and everything. So thank you guys for watching. Sorry for everybody that's already technologically savvy, and this is probably way too dumbed down for you guys, but I try to help out everybody. So yeah, well, thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Adios.